Have a mandatory negative test before flying home. These measures work. They're saving lives. And that's why our friends and allies are following suit. Just take the United States, where they've recently adopted the same requirement for a negative test before flying back into the country. We are doing whatever it takes to keep Canadians safe. As I've said before, when it comes to protecting you and your family, nothing is off the table. We will not hesitate to take even tougher measures if and when they're needed, and we'll be making an announcement in the coming days. The bad choices of a few will never be allowed to put everyone else in danger. Of course, travel is only one part of the equation when it comes to beating COVID-19. Fighting this pandemic also means we need the tools to test and trace the spread of the virus right here at home. In the last week alone, we've delivered over 1 million rapid tests to the provinces and territories. That brings us to 15.4 million rapid tests that we've sent out to the front lines, and even more are on the way. Le dépistage est essentiel pour combattre la COVID-19 et être dans la meilleure situation possible quand la vaccination de masse va commencer au printemps. On fait tout ce qu'on peut pour vous aider, vous et votre famille, à traverser la crise. Mais on ne peut pas y arriver seul. On a aussi besoin de vous. J'ai parlé des voyageurs plus tôt et des mesures strictes aux frontières, mais il ne faut pas oublier que c'est surtout la transmission communautaire qui continue de propager le virus. Il y a encore des gens qui se permettent des exceptions aux règles et malheureusement, ça fait augmenter les cas. Les hôpitaux sont sur le point de déborder. Des chirurgies sont reportées. On doit faire ce qu'on peut, ce qu'il faut pour suivre les consignes de santé publique. Restez chez vous, évitez les rassemblements, portez vos masques et téléchargez et utilisez l'application Alerte COVID. I think about all the people who've been on the front lines of this fight against COVID-19 for almost a year now. They know how far we've come, and they know that we need to keep going just a little longer. To our doctors, nurses, and long-term care workers, thank you. From Victoria to Iqaluit to St. John's, you're taking care of our parents, grandparents, and friends. Right now, you're working longer hours than ever. You are our heroes. Your service and dedication every day is remarkable. De nouveaux défis vont émerger pendant cette période incertaine, mais je sais qu'ensemble, on est prêt à les affronter. Ce matin, j'ai eu un appel avec le PDG de Moderna qui m'a confirmé une fois de plus que les contrats qu'on a signés très tôt avec eux seront respectés. De plus, comme prévu, avant la fin mars, nous allons aussi recevoir nos 4 millions de doses du vaccin de Pfizer. D'ici septembre, tous les Canadiens qui veulent un vaccin pourront en avoir un. Les vaccins sont sûrs et efficaces et on travaille sans relâche pour pouvoir les déployer le plus rapidement possible. Now, it may only be January, but this winter is already turning out to be a long one. And for many business owners who are worried about how to get through to better days, I know that spring and summer seem a long way off. When this pandemic started, we made a promise that we'd be there for Canadians. And every day since, we've done exactly that. Our government has rolled out the largest economic measures in Canada's history to support small businesses across the country, from the Canada Emergency Business Account to the wage subsidy. But even with this help, during a second wave, things are tough. For many businesses and their employees, it's hard to get back on their feet. That's why we're now partnering with Canada's largest financial institutions to introduce the new Highly Affected Sectors Credit Availability Program, or HASCAP. Through HASCAP, Canadian-based businesses that have been hardest hit by the pandemic will be able to receive low-interest loans of up to $1 million. These are 100% Government of Canada-backed loans and can be used for rent, utilities, and help with payroll. Later today, Minister Ng will have more details to share about the loans, including how to access this support once applications open on February 1st. Pendant qu'on aide ceux qui sont le plus durement touchés à traverser cette crise, il faut aussi penser à l'après-pandémie. Avec les vaccins qui continuent d'arriver, il y a de l'espoir à l'horizon. Ensemble, nous allons pouvoir rebâtir une économie plus forte et plus résiliente dans laquelle tout le monde a une chance de réussir. Une économie avec de bons emplois pour que les travailleurs puissent soutenir leurs familles dans un environnement plus sain et plus propre. On a du travail devant nous, mais je sais qu'ensemble, on va y arriver. Merci.
Merci, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll be starting with the phone today with one question, one follow-up, une question, une sous-question. Opérateur, c'est à vous.
Thank you. Merci. First question, Marika Walsh, the Globe and Mail, line open.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Thanks for taking our questions. I'm wondering if you can very clearly explain to Canadians the impact of Europe's threats around export transparency or blocks of vaccine exports or other limits on vaccine exports, what impact that will have on Canada's vaccine supply.
Over the past few weeks, I've spoken with executives at both Pfizer and Moderna who have assured me that we are very much continuing to be on track for receiving our full doses of vaccines in the timelines provided. That is a full 6 million of doses from Pfizer and Moderna by the end of Q1, the end of March. And we are extremely confident we will be able to have everyone vaccinated who wants it in Canada by September 2021. We will, of course, continue to work closely with our European allies and counterparts to ensure that there are not any disruptions to the Canadian supply chain. But Canadians can rest assured that we are working diligently every single day to get as many doses to Canadians as quickly as possible. J'ai parlé dans les dernières semaines à des dirigeants et de Pfizer et de Moderna qu'on source de l'Europe pour confirmer que nous allons pouvoir recevoir toutes les doses promises, toutes les doses pour lesquelles on a signé des contrats, c'est-à-dire les 6 millions de doses avant la fin de mars et toutes les doses nécessaires pour vacciner tous les Canadiens qu'ils veulent d'ici le mois de septembre. Nous allons continuer d'assurer que nos chaînes d'approvisionnement continuent de façon ininterrompue et nous allons toujours travailler avec nos partenaires en Europe pour s'assurer que les contrats pour le Canada soient toujours respectés.
Following up, Marika?
Yeah, the protectionist measures, though, that have been floated by Europe have come since your discussions with the CEOs of Moderna and Pfizer. Can you say definitively that our contracts with the vaccine manufacturers protect us from the European protectionism?
I'm happy to correct you on that one, Marika. I spoke to the CEO of Moderna about an hour and a half ago. So the topic of the recent musings by Europe certainly came up. And it was very, very clear that the Canadian contracts that have been signed and the delivery schedule laid out will be respected.
Merci. Opérateur, prochaine question au téléphone.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Lina Dib, La Presse canadienne. À vous.
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau. J'aimerais que vous m'expliquiez pourquoi il faut attendre encore avant que vous annonciez ces nouvelles mesures pour décourager les voyages. Parce que, bon, votre message, là, ne voyagez pas, on l'entend depuis mars. Et vous avez dit, il y aura des nouvelles mesures. Qu'est-ce qui retarde?
D'abord, il faut comprendre que le Canada a déjà, parmi les mesures les plus fortes pour contrer les déplacements internationaux de tous nos alliés. Depuis le mois de mars, c'est interdit aux non-Canadiens de venir au Canada. On a fermé nos frontières aux voyageurs étrangers. C'est seulement les Canadiens, les résidents permanents qui peuvent venir au Canada. Et ça, c'est depuis presque un an maintenant qu'on a ces mesures en place. En plus, en ce même moment, on a amené une quarantaine obligatoires pour tous ceux qui arrivent au Canada et c'est des mesures qui nous ont protégés énormément pendant la dernière année. Il y a quelques semaines, on a annoncé des nouvelles mesures, c'est-à-dire d'exiger un test négatif dans les 72 heures avant d'embarquer dans l'avion pour revenir au Canada. Pris ensemble, toutes ces mesures sont, comme j'ai dit, parmi les plus fortes au monde. Mais effectivement, même avec un très, très bas niveau d'importation de cas, un cas, c'est trop, particulièrement avec nos préoccupations avec les variantes qui sont un peu partout dans le monde maintenant, qu'on veut empêcher de prendre pied ici au Canada. Donc, on est en train de regarder comment on peut augmenter encore plus nos mesures qu'on a mis en place. Mais parce qu'on a déjà des mesures extrêmement fortes, il faut qu'on s'assure que les mesures qu'on met en plus vont être les bonnes parce qu'on sait très bien, Lina, que on dépend d'avions qui viennent de partout dans le monde pour notre nourriture, pour nos biens pharmaceutiques, pour des livraisons de biens essentiels. Et on ne veut pas interrompre les chaînes d'approvisionnement sur lesquelles les Canadiens dépendent. Donc, on est en train de regarder attentivement quelles mesures de plus qu'on peut ajouter à nos mesures déjà extrêmement fortes et on va avoir des annonces à faire d'ici très peu sur exactement comment on va pouvoir faire ça. On y travaille avec acharnement maintenant. I think one of the things to remember is that Canada already has some of the strongest travel restrictions in the world. As of last March, non-Canadians, non-permanent residents, aren't allowed to travel to Canada. There is a travel ban for all foreign travelers. That's something that we put in March and very much remains in place. On top of that, we brought in a mandatory 2-week quarantine, which is a measure that many of our allies didn't bring in, and that has been extraordinarily effective over the past year at keeping the importation of cases extremely low. But obviously, extremely low is still not zero, and one case is too many if we're importing, particularly given the variants out there. So as of a few weeks ago, we brought in a new measure that the United States is copying and that others are taking on, which is to demand a negative test in the 72 hours before getting on board the flight back to Canada. Because we already have some of the strongest measures anywhere, we have to be very careful as we move forward on even further measures. One just has to remember that we are reliant on supply chains from around the world for food, for goods, for essential medications, and we do not want measures that we have we're going to be bringing in to further restrict non-essential travel to have an impact on those essential supply chains. That's why we're working very carefully and very diligently on the new measures we will be bringing forward in the coming days to make sure that we are further discouraging non-essential travel, that we are further keeping Canadians safe, but we are not bringing in hardship around our supply lines.
En suivi, Lina?
Oui, merci. Je voudrais que vous m'expliquiez un peu mieux votre commentaire sur les chaînes d'approvisionnement. Est-ce que vous êtes en train de dire que les compagnies aériennes vous disent si on a encore moins de passagers qu'on a en ce moment, ça aura un impact sur le transport de produits pour la chaîne d'approvisionnement?
On sait très bien que dans beaucoup des avions qui sont des vols commerciaux avec des passagers dedans, il y a des biens qui sont transportés aussi dans ces avions-là. Alors, nous allons regarder les impacts possibles sur nos chaînes d'approvisionnement. We know that many commercial flights transporting passengers also carry goods in the belly of those planes. We need to make sure that we are not interrupting our supply line as we strengthen those measures.
Merci. Opérateur, dernière question au téléphone.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question. Boris Proulx, Le Devoir, à vous.
Bonjour, M. le Premier ministre. Toujours sur les voyages, j'aimerais savoir si vous considérez en fait que c'est trop compliqué de restreindre les voyages non essentiels sans, comme vous le dites, avoir un impact sur les activités essentielles du Canada.
Bien, je pense que depuis un an, on a démontré qu'une pandémie, c'est compliqué, mais qu'en même temps, on a pu mettre en place des mesures pour protéger les Canadiens à bien des niveaux. On a, comme j'ai dit, amené des mesures extrêmement fortes en termes de protéger les Canadiens d'importation de variants et de cas de COVID-19, que ce soit en bannissant les voyages étrangers les voyageurs étrangers depuis le mois de mars, avec la quarantaine obligatoire de 2 semaines, avec les nouvelles mesures sur le dépistage avant d'embarquer. Et on est en train de regarder d'autres mesures pour encore plus assurer la protection des Canadiens. Oui, ça peut que ce soit compliqué. Comme j'ai dit, la pandémie, c'est compliqué, mais nous allons nous assurer que ça soit fait de la bonne façon. Ce n'est pas les complexités de gérer cette pandémie qui nous empêchent de faire les bonnes choses pour protéger les Canadiens.
En suivi, Boris?
En suivi, trouvez-vous que certaines suggestions qui sont faites au gouvernement fédéral ou à votre gouvernement, on en a entendu tout plein là, ces derniers jours, dont de la part du premier ministre du Québec. Trouvez-vous que c'est farfelu, certaines de ces suggestions, trop simplistes peut-être de les mettre en œuvre? Comment vous jugez ça?
Ben non, on accueille avec grande ouverture toutes les suggestions, particulièrement celles des premiers ministres des provinces qui, eux, doivent gérer l'impact de cette pandémie sur les citoyens au jour le jour. On comprend tout à fait la frustration que je partage d'ailleurs, qu'il y a encore des gens qui insistent de voyager à l'étranger de façon non essentielle et qui mettent à risque leurs concitoyens, particulièrement avec la présence un peu partout dans le monde de nouvelles variantes qui pourraient se répandre encore plus rapidement avec encore plus de dégâts. Donc, je suis toujours ouvert aux suggestions et on est en train de regarder chaque suggestion pour comment on pourrait trouver la bonne solution pour protéger les Canadiens et assurer le découragement de voyages à l'international et aussi assurer notre éventuelle reprise économique. C'est un équilibre important, mais les Canadiens s'attendent à ce qu'on fasse cela.
Good morning, Prime Minister Ashley Brooks, CBC News. There's a lot of evidence that suggests that better quality masks reduce COVID transmission significantly more than lower quality masks. Why is the government pursuing things like curfews and travel bans, but is putting little or no focus on getting people to wear better quality masks or double masking?
One of the announcements made by Health Canada a number of months ago by PHAC was around extra inserts in masks. We continue to talk about all the different measures that Canadians need to take in order to keep ourselves safe. I know how challenging it is. I know how frustrating it is. I know how long this winter is feeling for everyone. But we just need to hang in there a few more months. We have mass vaccinations coming for the spring that are really going to start changing the posture we have to take as a country. But in the meantime, wear a mask, keep your distance, stay home as much as possible, avoid gatherings, download and use the COVID Alert app. These are all the things we know we need to do. We just have to hang in there a few more months to get through to the spring, and things will be much better.
Chris Reynolds, Canadian Press. U.S. President Biden is taking a pretty firm stance on the Buy American provisions that he announced yesterday, saying that exceptions will be granted only in rare cases that involve national security and a few other conditions. So, given the different U.S. political climate compared to 2010, how much bigger of a challenge do you expect it to be to secure exceptions for Canada to those Buy American provisions?
Over the past 4 years, we faced an American administration that was both unpredictable and extremely protectionistic. And we were able, every step of the way, to stand up for Canadian interests, whether it was renegotiating NAFTA in a way that protected our auto sector, kept supply management that President Trump wanted to dismantle, that ensured our cultural exemptions, our intellectual property rights. We were able to stand up for Canadians. We were able to defend our steel and aluminum workers. We were able to continue to demonstrate how important it is to keep essential supply lines going, even during a pandemic when the temptation was to completely shut down the borders. we were there to be able to advocate for Canada's interests, and I can tell you we will continue to be effective in advocating for Canada's interests with this new administration. Obviously, President Biden has a lot of similar priorities to this government's, to Canadians, whether it's fighting climate change, whether it's building back better and creating good jobs for everyone. These are things that we're going to be able to work on closely with our nearest ally and closest friend.
Oui, bonjour, M. Trudeau. Laurence Martin de Radio-Canada. Monsieur Trudeau, qu'est-ce qu'on fait si tout à coup l'Union européenne décide de bloquer nos exportations de Pfizer?
Évidemment, ce serait extrêmement préoccupant. On est en train de communiquer avec nos partenaires en Europe pour s'assurer que les contrats signés par le Canada soient respectés. Je comprends qu'il y a certaines préoccupations politiques par rapport à certains vaccins et certains pays. Pour l'instant, le Canada n'est pas compris dans ces préoccupations de l'Europe, mais nous allons continuer de travailler avec nos alliés. Depuis le début, le Canada a fait front commun avec l'Europe sur les vaccins, y compris sur l'enjeu d'assurer des vaccins pour tout le monde, avec notre participation à Gavi, à COVAX, à l'accélérateur. Nous sommes là pour travailler ensemble, pour s'assurer qu'on en finisse de ce virus partout dans le monde et nous allons continuer de travailler main dans la main avec nos amis européens. We have, from the very beginning, worked extremely closely with European partners on vaccines, whether it's supply chains for ourselves or ensuring vaccine access for the world's most vulnerable peoples, whether it's through COVAX, through the Act Accelerated, through investments in Gavi. The work and the close working relationship between Canada and Europe gives me reassurance that the contracts that we've signed and the supply chains that we have established with European manufacturers are in good shape. We will continue, however, to work very, very closely and monitor and ensure that Canada continues to get all the doses that we have contractually signed for.
Mais est-ce qu'au moment où on se parle, on est capable d'exclure cette possibilité? Est-ce que vous pouvez nous garantir que l'Union européenne ne bloquera pas nos exportations?
Pour l'instant, je sais que l'Union européenne se penche sur des préoccupations spécifiques autour d'AstraZeneca. On n'a pas sourcé d'AstraZeneca de manufacturier en Europe, mais on va continuer de travailler pour s'assurer qu'on a les vaccins nécessaires au Canada pour vacciner notre population. Comme j'ai dit, on est encore confiant d'avoir ces 6 millions de doses pour la fin mars et de pouvoir vacciner tous les Canadiens qui veulent se faire vacciner d'ici septembre 2021.
In English on AstraZeneca, please.
As we know, we will continue to work closely with Europe to ensure that we are receiving the vaccines that we have signed for, that we are due. The preoccupation seems to be a little more around AstraZeneca and some of their European productions around certain countries at this point. We do not have at this point or in the near future sourcing of AstraZeneca coming from the European manufacturers. But we will continue to work very, very closely. Our job, our priority, our focus is on making sure Canadians get the vaccines that we need as quickly as possible, as reliably as possible.
Prime Minister Michael Couture with Global National. Examples of hardening the border have shown success in other countries like Australia and New Zealand. You now have a growing number of premiers that are begging you to do it. So I'm just wanting to understand, what is taking you so long to announce measures to limit travel both in and out of Canada?
We have taken measures since the very beginning, since a year ago, that Canadians seem to take for granted. And it's a good thing because we have lots of other things to think about on our plate. But as of almost a year ago, foreign travelers are not allowed to come to Canada. We brought in a travel ban very quickly. We also brought in strong mandatory quarantine measures that the United States didn't bring in, that Europe didn't bring in, that many countries around the world didn't bring in because we knew that was something that we could and should do to keep Canadians safe. Furthermore, as we've seen variants expand around the world, we moved forward a number of weeks ago on further measures that put Canada near the very top in terms of hardened borders around the world. That is mandatory pre-boarding testing for anyone returning to Canada. The United States is actually looking at following suit on exactly that measures as well. So we already have some of the strongest measures in place, which is why the rate of importation of viruses is extraordinarily low. The vast majority of all of our cases in Canada come from community transmission. But obviously, even one case is too many on importation, and we are looking at even further restrictions on travel, which we are looking at very carefully to ensure that they're the right ones, that they're effective, and that they keep Canadians safe.
Hi, Mr. Trudeau. Mackenzie Gray with CTV News. There's a lot of negative headwinds and unknowns with vaccines right now. We've mentioned the EU. We've talked about AstraZeneca potential delays. And, of course, the big one for Canada right now is Pfizer delays. How can you promise we're going to have enough vaccines by September if you can't tell us how many Pfizer vaccines we're going to have in 3 weeks?
I can tell you that as of February 15th, we will be back in the hundreds of thousands of Pfizer doses every single week. In my conversation last week with the top folks at Pfizer, they assured me we are very much still on track to receiving all the promised doses by the end of March. The temporary delay in Pfizer deliveries that are happening not just to Canada but to countries around the world are related to improvements made at their Belgium manufacturing facility, and once that is done in the coming weeks, they will be able to deliver even more doses to Canada and to countries around the world. We are very confident that not only will we reach our target of vaccinating all Canadians who want it by September, but we are very much on track to receiving the 6 million doses we committed to Canadians we'd be getting by the end of March, exactly on schedule.
Merci beaucoup. C'est ce qui met fin à la conférence de presse d'aujourd'hui.
Merci beaucoup tout le monde.